Hello and welcome. I'm Darren, and today we're going to talk about the 4080. Because I like my 4080. Everyone's going to say, you love your 4080. And what we're going to talk about is a value, because this is a strange one. And this won't matter to everyone. And it kind of comes down to two things that don't really matter as much now as maybe what they did. Or maybe some things aren't as clear nowadays as maybe what they were. One of those is MSRP, and the other one is benchmarks. Because we're going to go kind of through the reasons of that. MSRP, probably most people should know now that MSRP in this day and age, and probably back when I bought the 4080, doesn't really mean that much, because no one's really buying stuff at MSRP. Your MSRP, realistically, let's be honest, if you have manufacturers that are doing founders cards, that is probably the only time you will see MSRP. And those cards generally get bought out, and those cards are obviously generally quite hard to get hold of in short supply. So what does MSRP mean? Probably not that much. And when you're looking at your different models, it's hard, and it's easy to get caught up in the blame game, naming and blaming probably the wrong people. I mean, I was looking at GPUs before, and I think it's fair to say that Asus are probably out of control. Now, people will blame Nvidia for it. Nvidia get mainly blamed for this, but you might find people are blaming AMD for it. I don't know. But when you look at the Asus cards, the pricing on Asus cards is ridiculous. And I've actually noticed Gigabyte are probably following suit on that as well. They've become one of the most expensive, it appears, partner brands, certainly in the pricing that I was looking at today. But getting back to it, the 4080. Now, the 4080, I bought the 4080. I had a look. I looked before, and admittedly, I got the price that I paid for it wrong. So I bought the 4080. I wrote it down. I'm going to have to have a look. I bought it back on the 14th of June, 2023. And I paid £1,066. I thought I paid 1,090 something, but when I looked back today to actually just to double check before I made this video, I realized that I had another item in that order. So I paid £1,066 back in June 2023, so nearly 2 years ago. And the 4080 was bad value, and I understand why it was labelled as bad value. I mean, I think Hardware Unboxed labelled it as one of the worst value GPUs to buy. It was an almost do not buy this GPU. Now, the problem was, I think for a lot of the time, they were basing that on the RRP of 1200, and then the RRP, I don't remember what it was, but the RRP of the 4090. Well, the 4090 was never anywhere near the RRP. You just could not buy the 4090 anywhere near its RRP. So when you're talking about the value of the 4080 versus the 4090, and when you're talking about them at RRP, you fall into the problem of, if neither of them are at their MSRP, then sorry, how far away are they, and how obtainable are they? And let's face it, the 4090, trying to find the 4090 for under 2,000 at any point, probably, certainly for the first year, maybe even last year, it might have been hard. It might have been up until around about the time when these GPUs were starting to get announced, when obviously people were probably thinking, okay, I was going to buy a 4090, maybe I'll hold out for a 5090. That's probably about the time when you could find them below that. If not, I think you were probably still paying £1,500, £1,600 for a used one, and taking the risk of not knowing exactly what you're going to get. So I can understand that side of the argument. I think the next argument was the price increase from the 3080. Now, I didn't quite understand that one, I'm going to be honest, because I was the owner of the 3080 Ti, and the 3080 Ti if I remember rightly, was 1200. Maybe it was 1000. I can't completely. I'm going to be honest with you. I can't quite remember. I did buy the Founders Edition. I can't exactly remember the exact price, but what I know is it definitely wasn't anywhere near the MSRP of the 3080 non-Ti, which was down around the 650 mark, I believe, for the MSRP. Now, obviously, that was for the Founders Edition GPU, and how easily were those to find? I don't know. I can't remember back then. Probably at that price, and with everything that was going on in the world with the pandemic and so on and so forth, those were probably hard to find anywhere near MSRP as much was anything. I actually paid, and I'm not scared to admit it because I needed something at the time. I'd fallen into the trap of selling my GPU, and this is a lesson learned. New GPUs were getting launched. I was on a 2070 Super, I believe it was. So I was running a 2070 Super, 30 series launched, and obviously 6000 series AMD GPUs launched, and I had sold my 2070 Super. I actually sold the whole system. So I sold the whole system, and I was building another system, and I found myself in the whole, here comes Rona, now I can't get a GPU situation. I ended up paying £1,000 for a 6800 XT from eBay. That's how bad it was on this island. Now, 6800 XTs were going for £1,200 in the shop. So I took my chances. The guy basically said, hey, look, I just bought it, I benchmarked it, and it's going straight back up for sale. And it was fine. Okay, I obviously got lucky with that. It was fine. I built a water-cooled system with it, but that goes to show that MSRP kind of means nothing. But getting back to the 4080, now the 4080, I obviously was listed as really bad value from the price apparently, which was taken from the 3080 to the 4080. Personally, I think the price was probably more, should have probably gone more in line with the 3080 Ti to the 4080. That's kind of, hey, people can say it. Do you know what I mean? People can shoehorn things in to fit however they want. I can say that to shoehorn into how I kind of perceive it. Someone else can shoehorn into how they perceive it. It probably doesn't matter that much. But regardless, it was bad price compared to the 3080, and it was a bad price compared to the 4090, which I'm going to say was kind of a unicorn product of good luck trying to get a hold of that one. So the 4080, for that reason, wasn't actually selling that well. And I think probably people were waiting. There was obviously the 7000 series AMD GPUs were close to launch. Maybe people were waiting on that. But whatever happened was the 4080, certainly in the UK, wasn't selling that well. They were sitting around. They weren't shifting. So this is actually probably the first time I've bought a GPU under MSRP. Now, I'm not going to say other people that bought 4080s got the deal that I got. So obviously I paid $1,066, and it was for the MSI Supreme X model, which should have been a model that probably would have been well over MSRP, because in GPU standards, the MSI Supreme is a very high level. Obviously it's got its overclock, but as far as standards, it is a quality GPU. I don't want to get rid of it because it is a quality GPU. Obviously, I'm still running it, and this is where this video goes before this goes on for way too long. So it was bad value. Now, looking at the relevance of that GPU today, I'm now starting to think, was that the bad value that people said it was? Now, this won't count to everybody. But what I will say is, for me, if I wasn't doing YouTube and if I wasn't running multiple systems and all the rest of the stuff that I run, and I only bought the 4080 when I bought the 4080, looking at it to now, in the market, at its performance, the fact that DLSS 4 has come forwards to it, it's still an extremely relevant GPU. That lasted me last generation, and performed extremely well. This now, with the next generation coming out, with AMD launching their flagship, and obviously so far what we've seen from Nvidia, have we seen the last of Nvidia? Who knows? Obviously there's rumors of more to come. As far as AMD, apparently that was what it was going to be. Who knows? But for what we have on the table right now, the 4080 is looking damn good. It's still holding its own, and what it's get beaten by is kind of how relevant is it? 4, 5 FPS, 6 FPS, 10 maybe in one game here or there, but then it's obviously, that's not all the time. It's beating its obviously competition a lot as well. We'll take a quick look at that in a moment, but it kind of puts you in this. Now this is a situation that I was in. So I bought the 4080, and then I wanted to build another system because I started running a sim rig, and I wanted a system on the sim rig and I wanted a system on the desktop, and I didn't want to keep moving systems around. So the idea at the time was the 4080 was brilliant. I was using it on the desktop, and the type of games that I was playing on the desktop, I'd use RT and I would use upscaling with. Now with the sim racing rig, I kind of was in the mindset of I probably just want something with decent raw power, and those type of games I'm not bothered about RT. And am I really going to be using upscaling? I didn't really think at the time. So I was watching a lot of content on YouTube. There were, probably the main battle of GPUs, I'd probably say, certainly obviously at the higher end, last generation was the 4080 and the 7900 XTX. I'd heard a lot about the 7900 XTX. A lot of people were saying the 7900 XTX is way better than the 4080. There were obviously people saying the exact opposite, but I thought, hey, do I buy two 4080s? That kind of seems probably a bit of a weird thing to do. I'll buy a 7900 XTX, stuff it. So I bought the 7900 XTX and I built another system. And it's a great GPU. It is an awesome GPU. I have no problems with it. It's ran perfectly fine, and it has given the 4080 good competition in certain areas. But I kind of decided, if you've seen any of my content, that if I had to choose one GPU to keep and one GPU to get rid of, I thought the 4080 was the better GPU. And I thought it was the better GPU because it had more rounded features, as in, at the time, DLSS 3 over anything else that was around at its time was the better upscaling solution, and obviously it had better RT. The 7900 XTX, the only thing that offered me was, now if I was a Call of Duty player, I could have gone a different way, because that is a big uplift for Call of Duty. 7900 XTX kicks ass in Call of Duty, but I'm not. So what the 7900 XTX offered was the extra VRAM. And that was the argument that went through the whole of last generation, was 16 gigabytes isn't enough. You can buy the XTX for the same price or even cheaper with 24 gigabytes. It is stupid to buy the 4080. Now fast forward to the generation after, and if you're wanting to buy a GPU now, unless you buy a 5090, you're still getting 16 gigabytes of VRAM. So that argument this generation's gone out the window, because people probably, 99% of people aren't buying the 5090. So most people are buying anything below that, and obviously on AMD, they haven't released anything with more than 16 gigabytes of VRAM this generation. So now that argument's gone. That's gone out the window. So I'd already decided that the 4080, regardless of the VRAM, I didn't have VRAM issues with the 4080. There were a few games where you might have had to do a couple of things, but at the same time I had to do more tuning with the 7900 XTX that was let down by FSR being not good, and when I was having to use an upscaler, it was unusable in quite a few times with FSR. So I would find myself lowering the settings rather than using an upscaler. Now with the Nvidia GPU, the 4080, I was able to use DLSS 3 at 4K at quality. Now People are saying that DLSS 3 was trash because DLSS 4 is out. No, it wasn't. DLSS 3 at quality was still very good. Now, I'm not going to say it was as good, obviously, as DLSS 4 was, but it was still very good, and it was still the best solution that we had at the time, and it was still generally a lot better than TAA or any other native solutions that were available in the games. So it was still a good tool for me to use to get above that 60 FPS experience where the XTX fell short. So fast forward to the new generation, and I've bought myself a 9070 XT. Now, I've bought that because of the promise of FSR4. And FSR4 has delivered on what it can do. FSR4 in the games that I've used it on is very, very good. I'd probably say it's better, or it's definitely as good, and it is probably better than DLSS 3. It's not as good as DLSS 4. So you've now got the 9070 XT, which is still, if I had to choose between the 4080 and the 9070 XT, because they both punch at a very similar level, RT probably still goes to the 4080 from the generation ago. Obviously, AMD have got a lot to catch up on. I understand that. So RT's still going to the 4080. And upscaling, if you wanted to say FSR and DLSS 4 are as good as each other, which I don't think they are. I still think DLSS 4, from what I've seen and from what I've compared myself, still has an edge over FSR 4. But it's available in so many games. And I don't have to do any modding. So all I have to do is go into the Nvidia app, and if DLSS is in the game, I click on the new model, and that's done. I don't have to use third-party apps. I don't want to use third-party software. I don't want to do modding. I've seen people doing it. I've seen people doing it and then posting up videos of what was wrong with it and how to fix it. I've seen people in a right mess that their systems are like, oh my god, my system's crashed and now it won't run, and all sorts of stuff. I'm not saying that I'm going to run into those issues. I've been running PC for I kind of know my way around a PC quite well, but I don't want to do modding. So again, the advantage for me is still going to the 4080. Now, I'm not saying that I wouldn't enjoy, if you only had the 7900 XTX, you've got a great GPU, you're going to enjoy what you're playing. If you have the 9070 XT, you have a great GPU, you are going to enjoy your time on it. It's only when you are in a situation like what I am, where I have both. And I'm still going to probably say at this moment in time, that I would keep the 4080 and I would let go of the 9070 XT if I had to keep and let go of one of those GPUs. So if you think that I paid $1,066 for the 4080 2 years ago, and in the same time I've bought a 7900 XTX for $1,050, and I've bought a 9070 XT for £800, I've spent £1,850 on two AMD GPUs that I would still put the 4080 ahead of. And this probably goes to maybe anyone that if you bought anything last generation and then bought something this generation, and you're still close to, so if you're 9070 XT this generation, or if you're 5070 Ti this generation, or anything below that, there's probably a very good chance that between what you paid for last generation and what you've paid for this generation, you've spent a lot more money than what I spent on the 4080 originally 2 years ago, and have been able to enjoy that level of performance for 2 years prior to now. And by what's out this generation at this moment in time, I could run it through this generation, because there isn't a lot that's performing, from what I'm concerned, that relevant above it. So we'll quick go to the internet now and we'll quick check that out, so you kind of understand what I'm saying. So let's go. So it's not coming up. Is it coming up? Hopefully it's coming up. So this is the GPU that I bought 2 years ago, the 4080 16GB Supreme X. So obviously this is an overclocked card. what it compared like to the 4080 Super, which launched later on. Probably, I don't think there's probably a great deal of difference in it, but obviously if you had the 4080 Super Supreme X, maybe there's a bit more in it. But obviously this was one of the higher performing, higher overclocked GPUs. Super cool, super quiet, awesome looking GPU, massive cooler on it, awesome. So let's go to the newest game that has been relaunched in testing, May the 9th, 2025. Now, the first thing I will say is tech power ops definitely don't match hardware unboxed, but there might not be a huge amount in it. I don't know. So you'd have to search all of the different games that have been posted up, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But what we're talking about is how relevant something is. So say for instance you're looking at the difference between the 4080 here and the 4080 Super. Is 0.7 FPS relevant? I wouldn't call that relevant. Is the 5080 at 129 point, so let's say 130 FPS, is there any relevance between that and 132 FPS? I'd say no. I'm definitely not buying, I'm not selling and then buying another GPU for 2 FPS. That ain't happening. But when you look at where we are right now, so obviously if you bought a 4070 Ti Super last generation, I'm not sure how much they were, let's say 700, 800 pounds, and you bought a 5070 Ti for 700 or 800 pounds this generation, you've spent 1600 pounds, let's say hypothetically 1600 pounds. Now you might have paid a lot more than that to land here, when I paid 1066 to land here. You see what I'm saying? Now, admit, okay, that's 1080p. Let's go off the 1440p benchmarks. That's not what I'm playing at, but it's probably the more relevant. So obviously you've got the same here. So 4070 Ti Super, 5070 Ti, that's cost you, let's say, 1600 to 1800 pounds collectively, but the 4080 is still here. It's only getting beaten by the 4080 and the 5080, and then you're talking the two, let's say, unicorn GPUs. Let's just discount those because, like I said before, the prices that they were available, the MSRPs didn't matter because they were never available for the MSRP. They were nowhere near available. So whatever it's not attainable for becomes almost irrelevant. And then if you go down to the 4K, obviously 4K benchmarks always become quite close. So, there's not normally a huge amount in it. But like I said, obviously in my situation, I had the XTX last generation and then the 9070 XT this generation. So combined, that's £1,850 versus the 4080 here, which is above both of them, for 1066. Now, even if it was down here in this chart, it would have still offered me better value than obviously what I would have paid between the both of those combined. So it doesn't even have to beat those. If it's close, within margin, it was still a better buy than the amount of money that I've then spent on both of those GPUs. And obviously this is just in pure raster performance. I don't know. Is there... I'm not sure if there's RT. Doom isn't a game that I've got much interest in, I'm not going to lie. Now, I purchased, one thing I will say is, I purchased the 9070 XT for FSR4 because we were kind of left in the lurch. Will FSR4 come to RDNA 3 or will it not? And there has been a few rumors recently that they are working on it and they will do their best to make it happen. I don't know how it will perform on those GPUs. Now, will this increase the value of what I'm saying right now of the 7900 XTX? If it has FSR4, absolutely. That means that basically, if it performs well on the XTX, that means that buying the 9070 XT, I threw my money away. That was a throwaway job because effectively the XTX with FSR4 having the 24 gigabytes of VRAM suddenly is a better value GPU than probably the 9070 XT even though that does have a bit of a ray tracing advantage, but is it enough? Obviously, then you could argue that the XTX is quite a bit shorter than the 4080 when it comes to RT. So there are caveats to it. It's not as simple as that. And like I said, this is for me. This is my. It doesn't look like there is RT in that. So it's not really something we can look at. But what we can look at is if I go to the newest GPU. So this is the newest GPU that has been tested on Tech Power Up, which means they've updated its relative performance against everything that comes before it. Obviously, you can see here, May the 1st, 2025 is the most recent one they've done. So when we go to relative performance, we can see that the 4080 is realistically only falling behind the 4080 Super, so it's at 106%. It's dropping 2% to the 4080 Super, and then it's dropping, what's that? So 9%. It's dropping 9% to the 5080. Nothing really that considerable. And then when we go to the 4K marks, which is obviously, this is the resolution that I play at, you can see that it does drop off a bit further, but is it significant enough? Is it significant enough that I would sell this GPU to buy that one, still that one being a 16 gigabyte GPU? No, it's not. 4080, obviously, in raster performance is still the same now as the XTX, and the 9070 XT falls short of it. So again, like I said, buying those GPUs, these are tied. The XTX and the 4080 in raster performance are still tied, and the 9070 XT falls that little bit short. So does the 5070 Ti. So I'm not saying this is, obviously, if you bought AMD for two generations, the same goes for anyone that probably did the same with Nvidia. Now, this isn't a dig at anyone. This isn't me laughing at anyone or trying to poke fun at anyone or being mean at anyone. This is just me saying the GPU 2 years ago that was said to be terrible value, if you've used the performance that you got with it, because take all these GPUs out of the equation, for the last generation, the only GPU that you had that would have performed above it was the 4090. There was only one GPU on the market. So if you were playing with that 4080 for last generation, well, you could say the 4070 Super. But let's face it, it's by a margin of, does it really matter? So when you look at that, and you had the enjoyment and the power from that GPU all of last generation, and you can run it through this next generation and still not fall short of what else is available on the market. That's the thing. It hasn't dropped down. So it's not like it's dropped all the way down the list of these all new super amazingly fast GPUs. Like when you look at how far down even now something like the 6900 XT is, or a 3090 Ti is holding on pretty well, let's be honest. 3090 Ti is actually quite close here. So you could probably argue, if you had the 3090 Ti back when that was available, and you were still running it now, and you'd kept it through all these generations, and you hadn't done the generational upgrade, was it as bad value as what people said it was, compared to the people that have had something more mid-range? Because, I mean, let's be like serious. Even if you bought a 4070 Super and a 5070, you've probably still paid more than what I would have paid for my 4080. And you're still quite a bit short of the performance that I would have had last generation and the performance that I still have this generation. Obviously, the one thing that is probably missing that I don't have, that isn't available to me, I understand that, would be that I don't have multi-frame generation. I've already said I've cleared that up in something else. I'm not discounting multi-frame generation. It's probably great for those people that have the high refresh rate monitors. I don't have any high refresh rate monitors. There is no reason for me to go out and buy it. to take advantage of it, I'm going to have to buy a new monitor, which means it's at least £1,000 upgrade on a GPU, and it's at least £1,000 upgrade on a monitor. It's £2,000 upgrade. Is it worth it just to make use of the multi-frame generation? I don't think it is. I think that's crazy. Now, if I had insane amounts of money that it just doesn't matter, I can just throw money at it and not care, then that's fair enough. That is my argument. But like I said, it's a specific scenario. But for the GPU that was... I couldn't find it. I wanted to look for the video today because... And this isn't saying that they're wrong in what they were saying. I understand what they were saying. But I remember listening to a Tech Power Up video, and I think it was one of the ones that they did, you know, like their talking videos. And I remember them going through the best GPU to buy and blah-de-blah-de-blah at different levels, and then the worst value. And I'm pretty sure they put the 4080 at the worst value GPU you could buy. And I was kind of laughing to myself thinking, oh, shit, you did well there, Darren. You bought the worst value GPU. But was it the worst value? Because for me, it's actually pretty damn good value. And for probably the scenarios that I'm talking about in this video, it could have been good value for other people as well. And that kind of goes to show relying on MSRP, relying on benchmarks that don't take into account features. Because, like I said, looking at the benchmarks, you could very much argue something like the XTX and the 4080, if the XTX was £100 or £200 cheaper, that it was better value. And I completely understand that. But if it actually comes down to you need the feature, so if you're playing at 4K and you need DLSS or you need FSR, how do those impact the performance of that GPU? Because if one's usable and the other one isn't, then suddenly you go from one GPU that might only be hitting 45 FPS to the other GPU able to use that feature that might be hitting 75 FPS. And suddenly the frame per dollar performance chart will shift dramatically. So I'm going to leave it there. Let me know. Now, this might trigger... I understand this video might trigger some people. This isn't a dig at AMD. And this isn't a dig... It's not necessarily a dig at anyone. But this is a specific scenario showing how something was labelled as the worst value. But with the GPUs that I've bought in the last couple of generations, it actually shows pretty good value to its relative performance still on the market at what is available on the market right now. Let me know in the comments. Batter me in the comments, whatever, it doesn't matter. But I'll be interested to know if there are people in that situation that bought whatever it was. Maybe you bought a 7900 XT or even a 7800 XT for $600 and something, and you've now bought the 9070 XT at maybe $800 or $900. I don't know. Obviously, those have been well above MSRP. So, did you buy both of those? Did you end up spending $1,400 on two GPUs to run these two generations, whereas you could have just bought one? And that would have done you for both the generations. And you would have still been on top for both the generations. Let me know what you think, and I'll catch you in the next one.